While divorce rates have declined among younger adults in recent decades, one demographic that's experiencing a spike in separations is adults over the age of 45, according to research from my friends at Bowling Green State University. It reveals that nearly one-third of all U.S. divorces now occur among couples experiencing midlife. It's now surpassed being a phenomenon and being commonly referred to as a gray divorce. The American Psychological Association notes that divorce among midlife can bring about major emotional, financial, identity crisis related challenges as you make this important life-altering transition, while also opening the door to concepts such as tremendous resilience, reinvention, and personal growth. In this inspiring episode, I sit down with my friend Heather Theisen-Gándara. She's the founder of Reignite Collective, and we explore what it truly takes to rebuild your life after divorce and why women over the age of 40 are discovering why their next chapter can be one of the most powerful and resilient yet. Dr. Theisen-Gandara shares her experience from growing up in rural Wisconsin to becoming an internationally recognized mentor, educator, speaker, and leader. As the first person in her family to hold a passport, her work extends across borders through extensive work and travel across Latin America, where she developed a deep fluency in Spanish and a passion for cross-cultural connection. She also holds a doctorate in educational leadership, a master's in counseling, and more than 2 decades of experience in international diplomacy and large-scale organizational leadership and management. She's partnered and worked with global organizations including the U.S. Department of State, ExxonMobil, and Baker Hughes. But behind the impressive resume was a deep personal story of reinvention for herself. After a 24-year marriage, she experienced the emotional and financial realities that most women experience after divorce. Instead of allowing that period of her life to define her, she rebuilt her financial independence, her sense of self-worth, reprioritizing wellness, losing nearly 100 pounds, which caused her to reclaim her identity, her purpose, and confidence. Through Reignite Collective, she now helps women navigate holistic recovery after divorce by focusing on aspects like emotional healing, wellness, rebuilding financial independence and empowerment, self-confidence, and personal style. Her message is compassionate and transformational. It centers around the concept that divorce doesn't have to be the ending, but the beginning of your next best chapter. And she joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. couple of seconds to welcome you to the program. I wish you a
Okay.
good Friday, and I'm excited to talk to you today about how you help couples reignite their passion for marriage, helping them through divorce and everything in between. It's great to see you, and happy Friday to you, my friend.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here. It's such a privilege to join you on the show.
Absolutely no. Heather, I know you're the founder of a company called Reignite Collective, where you help empower women over 40 to rise stronger and bolder after divorce, my friend. What inspired you to create this space, my friend, and company, and what in your view, does transformation look like after 40 and divorce for women, my friend? Tell me more.
Yes, so Reignite was born from my own transformation and reinvention after divorce. I was stuck in survival mode. I was 49. I came from a career in international diplomacy. My kids had just left for college, and I didn't think that I would be able to heal and rebuild confidence. And I really wanted to create a space for other women to heal like I did and reconnect with who they are. It's so important. And I just see this as a transformation time, a season of change. And I decided I wanted to be part of this movement. I'm 52 now, and I really want to help women discover who they are and give them the exact steps to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, I'm curious to ask you about what do you think women empowerment means after divorce? And I'm curious if you can draw on your own experience on rebuilding identity, purpose, and passion after divorce. What do you think women watching or listening to this need to know about sort of rebuilding their identity and purpose, my friend?
Yeah, I think that it's, frankly, really hard. I talked about a post this morning I did on time. The more time you spend in a marriage, the tougher it is to untangle that. But a perspective shift is that you are starting from a place of wisdom. You're not starting over, you're moving into a really seasoned time of your life where you are primed for independence, entrepreneurship. More women start businesses after 50 than any other time in their lives, which I think is phenomenal. And reigniting your life to me is holistic. This includes building and rebuilding self trust. That's a must with women who are coming out of a divorce. You have to look at what you can control. And for me, in my story, it was variables like my diet, my nutrition, and strength training. So I took the stagnant energy that could have gone into something very negative. And that's what I really think women can take that energy and focus it on something positive, whether it's meditation. A reinvention has to include your physical, mental well being, as well as staying grounded, regulating your nervous system. It's very holistic because in divorce, you're in survival mode for so long, and you really have to reconnect with your intuition.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Heather, I'm also curious to ask you about the steps that women need to take to really know their own personal value proposition after a divorce, because so many women identify with being married as their identity, and after that is gone, it's important to sort of reimagine your own value proposition, my friend. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on the importance of doing that. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, so one of the first things, especially if you're in Gen X like I am, it's overcoming. We have been a lot of conditioning. So that is a big one is self-care. We have been taught that it is indulgent, we are selfish, and we often have been pushed into a caregiver role, whether that's spouse, children, even without children. It's been home caregiving, taking care of even friends and family, giving, over giving, and not focusing on ourselves. And that conditioning is set in. So we have to take a look at that, and awareness drives change. So being aware that and giving ourselves permission to take care of ourselves, even neglecting health has I see very often with Gen X women, anybody over 40. Younger generations are starting to care for their health and wellness more, but changing that conditioning and then coming out of a stressful situation like divorce, like I mentioned before, you're in survival mode. So you become disconnected with your intuition. And anxiety becomes your decision maker. And it's taking the time to process your emotions, come back into yourself, discover your even bite-sized pieces of rediscovering joy and calming your nervous system. Those are some of the first steps. And like I mentioned, it's holistic. You've really got to think about grounding techniques, box breathing, just really calming the nervous system so that you can reconnect with your intuition and start making decisions from the frontal cortex where your rational thinking is located so you don't get stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, I know you live in Houston now, but you're a girl from rural Wisconsin, my friend,
Yes, sir.
and you speak now on global stages to women all across the country about reinvention, re-identity, and all the rest of it after divorce. So I'm curious, how did your upbringing from rural Wisconsin give you sort of grounding principles as you enter these global and national stages, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm from a small town in Wisconsin, grew up there. I'm the first one in my family to have a passport. And I really, first time I was on a plane was on the way to Ecuador to study Spanish. And then I entered a career in international education, exchange, diplomacy. I worked in that area for about 30 years and working across Latin America and the MENA region, did some work in West Africa. It really taught me that humans have a lot in common, and that is resilience. And even though people express it differently across cultures, it really gave me a foundation and an unshakable appreciation and I'm in awe of human connection, adaptability, identity formation. And regardless of I think where I've been, I have seen men and women they both carry an emotional burden and labor and still show up for everyone else. That just seems to be a commonality. Um, and that perspective shapes how I approach empowerment and reinvention. It's a movement. I'm so fortunate to have learned and studied and worked and lived in Latin America, so I'm able to communicate in Spanish. I see it as a great privilege to be able to communicate across cultures and have great respect for Latin America. I love it, and I hope to work in Spain too, but it's an incredible skill to have. And I just love the global aspect of my work, and I hope to continue that with like I said, Kevin, it's a movement. This women after 40 and 50 reconnecting with their life's purpose, and that's exactly what this phase of my life is about.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, I'm curious to ask you about, women with children after 40 and after divorce and effective co-parenting and really emphasizing the children that it's not their fault necessarily that mom is moving on or that mom is moving to a new stage of life. So talk to me about effective co-parenting and, communicating with kids after divorce. What do
Yeah.
you think goes into that in order to be successful, my friend?
A great question. It's first of all most important to consider, I think, for parents to consider a collaborative divorce style, which includes a team, an attorney, a mental health specialist, whether it's a coach or a therapist, and then a financial planner to work together on the divorce and stay away from litigation. That's one strategy that is also very child centered, and that is working on the custody agreement from a collaborative perspective and putting the child's needs first. And in terms of communication between the caregivers, it's really important. I think a lot of people in divorce think of what's changing and how to communicate that dad's leaving, we're staying here, mom's going there. It's really important to start with what's not changing. And that is mom and dad love you. We are getting divorced, but parents, for example, don't ever get divorced from their children. Things like that, the variables that are staying the same, the constants that will never change, and staying consistent with those. Here's the new schedule, and putting as much structure in place and staying consistent with those structures. That is key because predictability, structure, that foundation is what children thrive on as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm also curious to ask you about the whole idea of, starting over from a professional standpoint, if a woman was reliant on a husband, or even if they were the breadwinner in the family, and now that they have to start a new chapter of life. I'm curious to ask you about sort of the emotional, swings in psychological safety after divorce, whether you have to start over or you're the primary financial driver. So talk to me about the emotional side of divorce and starting over, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a huge transition. And I've seen some movements on social media that, there's a lot of like get rid of them, or there's, kind of minimizing some of I know that divorce parties are very in vogue, and, I can get into some of that. On some level, I don't want to take a position either way. People have their own experience, and I want to honor that. But just to respect that there is a transition either way, becoming head of household when you have made decisions together, whatever experience that was, whether it was conflictual, whether that you had a consult with another person. Now it's all on you, it's all on you, it's all on you. It's a transition. Either way, whether it was good or bad, that was a comfortable place for you. Your whole body and your nervous system and your brain have to transition into this is on me now. So either way, it's a transition. So I just want to recognize that is very difficult for some people. So you mentioned career. There's a lot of women who stayed home to care for children, or didn't have to work because of financial situations, or like you said, maybe they were the breadwinner. Either way, everybody has their own experience, and there are variables that change. So I encourage women to have awareness of that. Seek support networks, like-minded women. There are career coaches. I've worked with women who are coming out of staying home for 20 years, and one strategy is, if you have project managed a life and children and finances in a home and done a really good budget for 20 years, we're putting that on a resume. That's a transferable skill. So there's a lot of strategies to get you back into the workplace, to help identity shifts and to help mindset shifts that really can bring that empowering feeling back to your life, so that you can decide your direction. But either way, give yourself just permission to transition for a minute, before you rush into things. And I often talk about like stabilize before you keep on making decisions from survival mode, because you just want to make decisions that have long-term impact with that in mind.
Yeah, and Heather, you've got an interesting educational background. I know that you've got a doctorate in educational leadership and a master's in counseling. Plus, as you mentioned, you've got over 20 years in international diplomacy, my friend, and team management. And I'm wondering how your educational background helps you guide women into the next chapters of their life after divorce. How do you use that as a competitive advantage to your advantage, my friend?
Yeah, thank you. I love this question. I think that all of my experiences and my expertise has allowed me to approach this work from multiple angles. Counseling has given me insight into human behavior, the leadership, which both in theory from my doctorate and then also on the ground and leading international teams. I kind of feel like I definitely know leadership from a courageous perspective, on the ground, having difficult conversations, not just theoretical. So systems, growth, um, all of that has taught me also a lot of communication skills, both in English and in Spanish. And navigating high pressure transitions and connecting across cultures. Those are all valuable skills that without one of those experiences, I would not have that combination of skills. And then with my own divorce, that personal connection has given me expertise in my own transformation. Um, that has helped me, and then my divorce certification has helped me to look at the identity piece with the nervous system regulation, and that coupled with the confidence, leadership, financial rebuilding. So it's all come together into this season of my life, my over 50 life. And that's why I feel like this is my own life's purpose at this time in my life, to help women, inspire women to create a sustainable next chapter that inspires their vitality, longevity, their wellness, their best selves yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, you said that life after divorce isn't an ending, but the beginning of a next chapter. And I'm wondering if we can spend some time talking about redefining life after a divorce, because I believe that every opportunity in life is an opportunity to learn. So talk to me about divorce not being an ending, but the beginning of a new chapter, my friend.
Yeah, so I think any change can lead to a transformation. And again, I don't want to minimize the pain that comes with an ending. I think that stabilizing after an ending is important, and honoring your feelings and processing them is also part of the process. But beginning a new chapter and stripping away identities that were never quite ours to begin with is where the opportunity lies. And my own lack of self-care throughout my life, this is no one's fault. And then um, I had led me to poor health in some ways, and the impact that that had on my life. And I realized too, in my mental health state, I was really living in fear. And the ending of my marriage, as I mentioned before, I was allowed me the opportunity, if I'm reframing it, to focus on myself and face some things that I didn't have the opportunity to face before. I didn't have a choice. I needed to face my health problems, and my why included longevity, vitality, my children, and stepping into this new chapter that the choice was taken from me. I was going into it like it or not. And I also had to face some things about myself that I realized this was a mutual relationship. I had some trauma from childhood that I had not dealt with, that led to an emotional distance from my ex-husband, that partially led to us growing apart, and was able to own that and get some help for that, for example. Um, and that has led to making me a newer version of myself. And that's what I mean when we put things off for years and years. And when something comes, a death, and divorce has been synonymous with death and life change descriptions for years. When something like that happens in your life, the variable of choice is taken from you. You step into things you never thought you would do. So I do see it as an opportunity to do some really hard things, and we're all capable of it. It's in there, the courage to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, you also say it's important for women to ask themselves what parts of their patterns or personalities were dominant during the marriage or relationship with a significant other, and how they can help carry those through the next chapter of life. And I'm wondering why you think that question is so important, my friend.
Yeah, so really having an honest look at your own patterns, because if there's things that you want to change before you start dating again, and this is one thing that I help clients with, I walk the journey with them, and it's a privilege, is to help people decide when they're ready to date again. I'm having a master class on this in June, and it's called Return to Self Ready for Love. And it's not about like how to get on Facebook dating or anything like that. It's really looking at your own patterns and releasing patterns so that you, if there's something negative about a pattern, you don't start from that same foundation. It's looking at whether or not you're starting from a place of wholeness, or if you're starting from a place of loneliness, which means you're not ready. So it's really taking a look at yourself, building yourself holistically, so that adding a person to your life complements you, not completes you. You should be complete on your own. And that's a hard transition. I know people rush into um, almost replacement situations that can be very damaging, and that also follow similar patterns. If you were codependent, or if you had limiting beliefs around X, Y, or Z, you will tend to follow those same patterns unconsciously in a next relationship if you don't confront them, or if you're not quite ready to date. But I always invite women to explore, and men too, to explore themselves and identify. First up is awareness, and then identifying those patterns and what you'd like to change. And I'll be honest, it took me a while. I was not the one who decided to get a divorce in my relationship, and it took me a while to get to a place where I was emotionally ready to look at my own contributions to the divorce, to kind of get out of the shock and the anger of it to where I was ready to look at that. So it's a process. And I didn't date for over 2 years. That's how long it took me, for example. And every journey is different.
Yeah, and I'm curious to ask you a couple of research questions next. Heather, there's research from the Pew Research Center that says nearly 1 in 3 women who are between the ages of 45 and 65 who are divorced report being more happier than ever because they look at this as a chance of renewal and reflection, my friend. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on those findings, and why do you think so many middle-aged women are happier after divorce, my friend?
Yeah, I think there's a big mix. I think some people feel very lost. And then I think that when people have that support to get there, I do think, as we were talking about, that it's an opportunity to really embrace a side of them, reconnect with passions that they may have let go of or stepped into roles that they adapted themselves into for harmony, for survival, creativity, sensuality, ambition. Some of the adventure and playfulness have kind of taken a second um, fiddle to really themselves and reconnecting with self care. And I think it's less about divorce than it is about awareness in this season of life. I've also seen couples who, if they're willing to really take a hard look at their own situations and what has gone dormant for them, also sort of reignite a spark and adventure and reconnect to their life's passion. It's the willingness to go deep, look at what you've lost, and really want to step into the next chapter. And I think it's misinterpreted as, oh, I lost 180 pounds and got rid of my husband. And I think that's oversimplified. Maybe, and I know that it's a big joke on TikTok and stuff, but, and I, can get into that too. I think some of that's true too, but it's not only about that. It takes a lot of self-discovery, and I've seen couples do it as much as single women or single men. It takes a lot of awareness and self-discovery to get to that point, but it's a beautiful transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but I wanted to drill down on this because Forbes says that 65% of middle-aged women today are fearful from a financial standpoint about starting over their life, but 91% of middle-aged women admit after a divorce they rarely seek financial advice. So talk to me about the importance of financial education after a divorce and what you make of those findings, my friend. I'm curious to get your answer there.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this because first of all, I'm re-educating myself, and I had a lot of fear around this. And I have a lot of clients who have a lot of fear around this. Financial empowerment and education. I'm going to give a shout out to Sarah Zeiss from a networking group I'm in called Networking and Action, who is my financial advisor. And she comes from a unique research perspective that really systemically, this is the first generation, and I'm speaking of my generation being 52, Generation X, and subsequent generations, that women have had access to a lot of mortgage, credit cards, access to um, empowering um, financial contracts that were previously our mothers had to have spousal permission to have, for example. And I'm just learning this now because I'm like, why are we so behind the ball? There's partly systemic reasons for that. And there's a lot of empowered women who know a lot about investment. But like you said, Kevin, research shows that women are typically not as, it's a very masculine sort of role to manage finances. In my case, I project manage lots of parts, even of finances, like the school loans for the kids going to college. That I had experience with. But as far as the family budget, family finances, my ex-husband did all of that. And I was married 24 years. So that was a long time of non-participation for me. So I came out really struggling and a lot of fear, in part because I grew up in a very challenged economic situation and came from a mindset of extreme scarcity, so had a lot of fear and trauma around finances. That all combined led me to Sarah Zeiss. If anyone wants her information, I'm happy to give it to you. She has a philosophy that safety in terms of insurance and then empowerment in terms of education, and all of this can be combined into one type of financial advising. Whereas I had a financial advisor over here, I have an LLC, so I had an accountant here, bookkeeper here, and I have such a block against it. It was difficult for me to make it all make sense from so many different sources. And I'm so fortunate to have found the systemic information that helped to validate some of my lack of education. It was very, very helpful to see that perspective that this is generational.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, I'm curious to ask you this important question because part of reinvention and rediscovering yourself is dating again after a divorce. And I'm curious to ask you about the important questions that women should ask themselves before jumping back into dating because the emotional or psychological healing after a divorce is different for a variety of women. So I'm curious, what questions should women ask themselves before jumping back into the dating pool after a divorce, my friend?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I talked about my timeline of being 2 years. First thing I want to start with, it's it's different timelines for everybody else. I've met women who are 20 years past their divorce and not ready to date because they're very connected to their divorce story and still attached to the anger, and they haven't processed their emotions. I've met other people who have a healthy sense of their intuition again. They trust it again. They're past the survival mode. They process the past and they are beyond recreating old dynamics. That is one of the key issues. When you're dating, the goal is to date from wholeness, from a place of being complete. And that feels very different than dating from loneliness or fear. Again, the whole thing of like, I need this to complete me, either to complete me financially or to help me heal. That is not something that will typically or statistically lead to a healthy new relationship. Um, I'll use an example of if you're controlling in the kitchen, or like I said, codependency, or you typically choose a certain type of man based on a phobia or somebody who's an alcoholic, you're more likely without awareness to those patterns to follow that same pattern and recreate and build on the same foundation with old dynamics. And processing through that, recognizing those patterns can help you build from a new foundation. And the goal is to maintain your sense of self inside of a relationship and not lose yourself, if
Yeah,
that's helpful.
yeah, absolutely. And my friend, I'm curious because I've got two questions left for you, and I'm curious to ask you about the emotional healing after a divorce. Social isolation can be
Yeah.
a big problem after a divorce because, as I mentioned throughout our conversation, women attach themselves to being the nurturer of the family when it comes to being married to a husband or having kids. So I'm curious about finding strength through vulnerability after a divorce and the emotional work that has to go into finding yourself after a divorce after you're detached from the nurturer position of being a wife or a mother. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, it's really important. I think a couple of things come together that are at play. Recognizing and just knowing if anyone in your audience is just going into a divorce, just knowing that you're going to be in survival mode. In a lot of cases, in my own case too, you go into this, your adrenaline, because you're in survival mode, you I went into project management mode and processed my feelings 2 years later, which is not the right way to do it because it's such delayed grief that I had a really hard time. And a lot of women and men have a really hard time because they aren't vulnerable. Like you said, they're getting through this, they're strong, they're angry, their emotions. But at some point, you're going to become depleted, and that is going to change. So, staying grounded, doing box breathing, taking the time for yourself, and processing some of these emotions. You really, if you can find like minded women, there's a group that I sometimes volunteer with called Second Saturdays. It is a nationwide in the US, and there's some in Canada and internationally, support groups that meet at a local library, where you can get together and just process some of what's going on with other women who are going through a divorce. Um, to get some of this out as you're going through it, because survival mode can be fierce. I've seen people, really get up with the adrenaline, but it's going to run out at some time. And you want to take some of that out as you're going along, whether it be a therapist or a coach, if it feels aligned. On my website, you can set up a complimentary discovery call, just to see what we can do to help you process some of those emotions. For example, seek support, seek like minded women, and do try to be vulnerable.
Yeah, building community is awfully important when you go through any life transition, just not
Yeah.
divorce, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, just before I ask you my very last question, I'm also curious to ask you about, religious beliefs. And if you come from a family where divorce isn't traditionally accepted or frowned upon, but you think that your only resort is to get out of the relationship. I'm wondering, from a religious and societal standpoint, how you help women get over those hurdles as well. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a personal choice. I I I'll share that I'm Catholic, for example. I was married in a church and it is frowned upon above my church, but it depends on, and that's the church I grew up in. I am penalized in some ways by the Catholic Church, but it depends on your relationship with my relationship with God is based on love. I don't believe that he looks down on me because I'm divorced. Um, and I work with women to determine what their personal relationship is, and I will with their higher power and whether or not they're looking at their personal relationship or the rules of their church. And I will refer out, I have Christian or other religious coaches to refer them to if they're really having trouble with that, or refer them to their church if needed, if they're really struggling with it and the decision to divorce. And I've seen it impact people both ways, that
Yeah,
they are able to or not able to.
yeah, absolutely. And Heather, my very last question for you has to do with personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want yours to be defined.
Yeah, so Kevin, this is a women's movement. I see this season of life, as you said, women are thriving. They just need help getting there. I feel like it is a an incredible honor and privilege to walk with women on this journey and to it's my life's work at this stage of my life. For a long time, the international exchange and diplomacy was, and it's just shifted in my over 50 work. Now, Reignite, it's still on a global scale, but it's really helping women connect with their life's purpose. Is just, if I can help a few people in this season of my life, I will have left my legacy, sharing my story, which at first was very, very difficult for me. And somebody told me one day, like, I think people would like to hear about this. And I hadn't thought about that. I always think of pain as very personal. And once I thought of it from that perspective, if it can help someone, then I will have left a legacy. And of course, I think of my children when I think of legacy and just knowing that I followed my life's purpose and I took a risk to make a life change, a career change at 50. Um, but I followed my intuition. It's important. And it's really, really important and it feels good. And the universe has your back when you follow your life's purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, finally, tell me if people want to get connected with yourself personally or Reignite Collective. What's the best way they can do that, my friend?
Yes, please follow me on social media. It's at Heather Glows Again, TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube. I have all kinds of free resources I post almost daily, and I love again a community. I'm really intent on building a community where we can have honest conversations about divorce. And then my website, reignitecollective.com. Please schedule a complimentary discovery call where we can talk about your wildest dreams and how to get there. And I would love to hear from you. And if that feels aligned, please contact me.
Well, Heather, I have to tell you that finding purpose and passion after a divorce is a tricky and sometimes vulnerable subject for a lot of middle-aged women, and I want to thank you for giving them direction and identity again, and for engaging in conversation, my friend. It was delightful to meet you, and I want to thank you for the time and effort on my behalf. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, Kevin, and happy Friday.